Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast, member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and a member of Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
My name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write about movies, and I'm also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
And my name is Evan Crean. My pronouns are he, him. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast.
Yes, you are, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
All right. Well, like every week, we talk about movies. And before we dive into this week's movies, we've got three new ones. We want to tell you about our Patreon because we had a great conversation and some divergent points of view where we talked about Juror Number 2, the new Clint Eastwood film. So if you're a patron, go check it out. And if you're not, consider joining for $5 a month. And while we're talking about Patreon, we want to give a huge shout out to and thank you to our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs. So thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
All right. So for this week's show, we're going to be talking about the drama Nickel Boys, the mystery Conclave, and then another new film, the documentary Chasing Amy. So that's what we're going to start off with. This is a documentary that's written and directed by Sav Rogers, who's a trans man, and talks about his experience of loving the Kevin Smith film Chasing Amy. So let me give you the synopsis from the press release. Sav Rogers sets out to examine the complex legacy of Kevin Smith's Chasing Amy on LGBTQ plus people and its life-saving impact on Rogers himself, who came into his queerness via kinship with the film. He makes significant progress garnering support from Kevin Smith, but as the production continues, Rogers is faced with unexpected truths that change his relationship with the film and himself. So in addition to Sav Rogers being in the film, his wife, Riley, is in the film as well as interviews with Kevin Smith, Guinevere Turner, Joey Lauren Adams, as well as filmmaker Andrew Ahn and film critics like Princess Weeks and Trish Bendix. And yeah, it starts off as kind of this, as he says, kind of this love letter to Chasing Amy. And it was, the genesis of it was his TED Talk that he did years ago, talking about how the film Chasing Amy saved his life. And it was kind of his entry point into queer films, even though it's a divisive film, written and directed by a straight man. But yeah, so the TED Talk garnered a ton of views, got attention by Kevin Smith, as well as other celebrities like Brie Larson. And yeah, Sav Rogers started making this film back in like 2018. And he hadn't come out as trans yet. But he talked about the film, like Chasing Amy, and his queerness and how it awakened his queerness and how he was bullied as a kid, even before he knew he was queer, by people who were calling him queer, homophobic slurs. And yeah, so it's really about this film and how much he loved it, and about kind of like the making of the film, as well as the film's impact, both positive and negative, the critique that it's received over the course of time when it came out, as well as now. And yeah, but it's also very much about Sav Rogers' own journey through, to self-acceptance and his relationship with his now wife, but who was his girlfriend previously. And like we see their engagement, which is very sweet. So yeah, it's a very, very personal piece. And yeah, so what did you guys think of it? Let's start with you, Dave.
Oh, we'll start with me. I really liked this a lot. And I liked it more as it went along. When it first started out, I was like, well, this is puffy. I mean, it's just like, I just kind of feel like, oh, I love Chasing Amy. And yes, I say that kind of lightly, but I don't take lightly the, I guess you would say suicidal ideations that Sav Rogers had. And I can appreciate finding a piece of, let's just call Chasing Amy art, finding a piece of art that makes you feel like, oh, today I'm not going to do it, you know?
Mhm.
And sometimes that's what you need. And sometimes that's all you need. And
Yeah, that's true.
so I thought that was kind of touching, but then the way it starts out with, kind of going to Jay and Bob's secret stash and, talking to Kevin Smith about how much Sav Rogers loves it. I was just kind of like, well, I like Kevin Smith and this director kind of seems neat, but I'm not really digging the vibe beyond what we already went over in the first 5 minutes,
Mhm.
But then when Riley enters the picture, for some reason I was like, Riley, the fiance, I was kind of like, I kind of like Riley. I want to see where this is going to
Riley's
go.
cool.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
Riley is this like sweet, well-rounded, really thoughtful person, which it's so rare to see really thoughtful people. Especially when you think about movies that are fiction, not because people don't write that way, but because there's not time generally for thoughtful people in movies. Like your running time doesn't allow it, So I was really interested in that. And then when Sav Rogers came out as trans, I was like, well, where the fuck is this going to go? Because now I'm not really sure what to expect. And I was also really intrigued by all of the like critics and filmmakers and all the other people who identify as queer talking about what the problems they have with Chasing Amy, but also a lot of them also have some love for it too. So like the
Yeah.
ambivalence to me was fascinating. And then when we get to Joey Lauren Adams and Kevin Smith being together and him talking about this, our relationships, Joey's made this all possible. But then we go to her interview and you find out that she has been carrying around this resentment for nearly 30 years about she's like, I'm truly happy for Kevin that he like figured his shit out and he's had a wonderful marriage. But like I've been carrying around how he treated me since 1996. And it's like, oh, I was not fucking expecting that. And just like
Yeah.
the realness of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she pulls no punches. Like even at the beginning of the interview, when she's like, seriously, Sav Rogers, so she doesn't call him Sav Rogers. Like, seriously, Sav Rogers, what the fuck are you doing this documentary for? Why are you interviewing me? We could have done this at a convention. And it's
Right.
like, oh boy, you better get on your game, Sav Rogers. And you can see that they're like, well, and then they sort of make this agreement like, well, we're not going to make this like, as Joey Lauren Adams says, like the standard bullshit Chasing Amy interview. And it becomes this kind of deeply personal thing about the complicated feelings that Joey Lauren Adams has about it and how she has so much resentment about it, even though she still loves having played that character. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, people have so many fucking levels. So I was just sort of fascinated this from just like having, from the filmmaker Sav Rogers to Riley coming to terms with Sav Rogers being a trans man when she identifies as a lesbian, and then all of the filmmakers and the critics, and Guinevere Turner talking about how like, we made this fucking movie that everybody loved, but everyone's like, ooh, Chasing Amy. But at the same time, she's like, but I love Kevin and Scott Moser is what, I love Scott Moser who produced Chasing Amy, and just it was fascinating.
Well,
Messy.
also, I'm so glad you mentioned Guinevere Turner, because at the same time Chasing Amy was happening, Go Fish was happening.
Exactly, yeah.
Rose Trochet's, seminal lesbian film, but Go Fish, even though it found its audience amongst a lot of, lesbian women and queer women, it didn't get the same love that Chasing Amy did.
It didn't.
And she talks very candidly about that.
Yeah.
Especially considering her conversations with Kevin Smith about being a lesbian and what that meant to her, and certain kind of idiosyncrasies show up in Chasing Amy. And she's like, oh, that's why you were talking to me about this.
Well, I thought it was also interesting that I didn't know this, how I guess Scott Mosier had, what did Guinevere Turner call it? She's like a romantic friendship.
Yeah.
With Scott Mosier, and Mosier's interviewed too, and he's like, yeah, I loved her. I mean, it's like Scott Mosier. I just always love watching him be interviewed. One, because that voice of his is just like, how can anybody's voice be that deep and not be the lead singer of Crash Test Dummies?
I just feel like I can't think of a queerer answer than, yeah, we had a romantic friendship. Like it's a quintessentially queer answer.
Yeah. And I didn't know that Kevin Smith was like, you should write a movie about you and Guinevere Turner. And he's like, I don't know how to do that. And so Kevin Smith was like, so I did it, So,
right. Yeah. And then somewhere between that, their real life friendship and his relationship with Joey Lauren Adams, we have a story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I'm glad you brought up the Joey Lauren Adams part too, because
I was not expecting.
Wow.
I mean, I figured her feelings were probably different. I didn't know that's what they were.
I suspected something interesting was coming when I think we were over halfway through the documentary and we hadn't gotten to her yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's Joey Lauren Adams?
I'm like, she has to be involved in this.
Right.
But they're probably saving her for later because they probably have something really interesting or juicy to say. And so they're kind of they're drawing it out a little bit so that when we get there, it's like,
Papow.
Yeah. Well, 1-2 punch, which it definitely is. I agree with that.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah. Evan, what did you think of this?
Oh, I also really enjoyed this. Like Dave, I think initially I was feeling like it was a little puffy in the beginning. And then I really enjoyed the layers of it. This is a very layered, nuanced documentary in the commentary it provides by all the people interviewed, both, as you mentioned, film critics, filmmakers, people who are directly involved with this movie and kind of in its orbit, so to speak. And I love that it goes deep and it just digs into it. The ways that this movie is problematic. These like ideas of like, oh, straight guys think they can turn a lesbian, into a heterosexual woman things and the problematic aspects of the movie. But then when the movie is talking about how it was really important that the movie was not directly talking about bisexuality, but like also contributing to the conversation about it. And when bi erasure is a big thing, I thought that was really fascinating. Sav's relationship and evolution throughout the movie, also very interesting. But I think really the meat and the interesting part is when we get to Joey Lauren Adams. After we've had the like her and Kevin Smith dual interview, and she really just digs into all of this trauma, resentment that she's been dealing with this entire time because of this movie and its place being so beloved when it was not a good time in her life and not a good relationship that she had with Kevin Smith, especially when she made the comment something like, how can you love someone when they can't love themselves or something? I forget exactly what she said, but it was something that like really sharp and poignant about someone who's like so wildly insecure that like, or it's like, how can you love someone that doesn't believe they deserve love or something like that? And it was just so on point and such a, I don't know, 1-2 punch was a great description. It really hits you in a good way and kind of knocks you on your ass. And I definitely think it knocked Sav on his ass too.
Yeah, I definitely don't think he was expecting that.
Yeah,
No.
I was not expecting it in the slightest. And then like, whoa, I have to like reconsider my whole like thoughts about this movie.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift for sure after hearing what Joey Lauren Adams had to say. But I think along those lines that you're talking about, Evan, I think the other interesting piece of that is the way Joey Lauren Adams was not just talking about how terrible their relationship was or how terrible it had gotten, because she's like, for Kevin, I was his muse, he figured all his shit out, how great. But then she's like, but for me, she's like, I made this movie that I'm really happy about, but also I'm with my boyfriend who made me feel like shit all the time. And I'm like, Jesus, like, because he was so pathetically insecure, it made her feel like shit. But then I also really like the piece where she was talking about Harvey Weinstein and how obviously what a gross abusive creep he was. and how, while this was happening and they were getting all of these accolades, and she's like, Kevin had to kiss his ass, which was so awful. And she's like, and Rape McGowan is being raped, while all of this is kind of happening. And, she was saying like Harvey Weinstein hated me and talked about how I wasn't attractive and, wasn't fuckable. And like, it just like kind of all these gross things. And she talked about like how she, like, it was kind of the culmination of all the things that she dealt with in casting rooms and dealing with directors and then doing interviews about Chasing Amy and how everybody was kind of all the men were gross towards her. So yeah, it was like
even that
all
Conan
of
O'Brien
this.
clip where he looks at her and says "me likey" or something like that. Ugh.
I know. I love Conan O'Brien, but I absolutely despise his shtick of being like a leering, creepy guy. It's gross. And I know it's a shtick. Like, I know, like, that's what he's like. He's making fun of that, but I'm like, it doesn't land the way you think it does. It's gross.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All the commentary on Harvey Weinstein and how that her career and her relationship to this movie is also wrapped up in that was really poignant.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, like both of you, I thought this was really interesting. And at first, I think you said it was puffy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I kind of love that description because at first I'm like, oh, this is a little happy-go-lucky. And I was like, and I knew that Sav was a trans man. And so I was like, there has to be like more depth to this film, this documentary. And we definitely get that. And I really loved seeing Sav insert himself into this and talk about his queer journey and trans journey. And I loved seeing him and Riley together. They were very sweet. At times it almost felt like a separate movie, and I'm not mad at that.
I hear
but yeah, but I felt the most salient parts were Guinevere Turner talking about it and talking about how frustrating it was being a lesbian and seeing a straight man, even though she was like, Kevin is so smart. He has such a great ear for dialogue. He's a great filmmaker. He's a great friend.
Yeah.
But like still being frustrated, the dialectic, both things can be true simultaneously. And then same with Joey Lauren Adams, like that was just a revelation. And Dave, you and I have talked about this before. I've always liked Joey Lauren Adams. She's amazing.
Absolutely.
Always wish she'd been a bigger star. But then part of me is like, maybe she didn't want to be a bigger star after this.
Maybe that's kind of what I'm thinking now too.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, this seems to have been life-changing for her too in a horrid way, not a good way. But I will say, I feel like I'm curious what your experiences are with Chasing Amy, because I feel like it's very interesting because like when Chasing Amy came out in 96, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then it is a film that's very much soured over time for me. But at the same time, like, Evan, you were talking about the biphobia and the bi erasure and everything. And the fact that they never talk about bisexuality in the film, they never, ever, ever talk about it, which is so gross and so awful. And, culturally at that time, it was either you're gay or straight. And even still today, even though, yes, people are bi and pan. And I mean, of course, people were bi and pan then too, but it's much more open. But there's still so much bi erasure and biphobia, and bi people are presumed to be promiscuous and can't be trusted. And it's really hard to date as a bi person. But I will say that at the same time, it was kind of one of my first queer films, and it was kind of my entry point to having a film talk so frankly about queer women having sex in a way that was very revelatory for me as a queer person who hadn't come out yet. So it does have good things, but it also has horrible things. And it is such a complicated film with a complicated legacy. And I love that the film doesn't shy away from that.
It's true. It's a very, very mixed bag. I don't even remember the last time I saw Chasing Amy. It has to be at least 20 or more years ago. And I think I remember feeling like it kind of, the more you think about it, it kind of ages like milk.
Yes, definitely.
Like, I also remember enjoying it when I first saw it, but now reflecting back on it, I'm just kind of like, yeah, there's a lot of yucky stuff about it, but they talk a lot in the documentary about like this movie it wouldn't be made now because it would be considered too problematic. But at the time, there wasn't great representation, so this is what was out there. The movie did get made, and it is problematic, but it also has really interesting things to say, and it does provide representation. And I loved that comment that Sav made. I think it was maybe in that TED Talk. To be fair, I didn't know there were other queer movies, and I thought that was
Yes.
very funny.
Yeah.
Because
That was really
at the
funny.
time, it's, you know, people, we didn't have Google back then. There's so many like things that now there are more conversations, more connections via the internet and in life. And yeah, it was representation that mattered, and it did accidentally stumble into some really great points.
Yeah. I like how also everybody's is clear that they're like, and the things that are good about it are kind of accidental.
Yeah.
You know, like the whole idea of fluidity is just
Yes.
like the complete accident. You know?
Right.
So-
Right.
But
yeah.
I watch it. If I were to watch it now, I'd think, oh well, she's fluidity, whatever. You know,
Right,
it's like
right.
we all know what that is now. You know, so
Yeah, and that's the thing. I don't think her character is the problematic part. Her character
Right.
is amazing. It's
Yeah.
everyone else around, which I guess you could chalk it up to, well, that's society, you know. Society is problematic as fuck, so maybe it's that. But again, I think that's a big testament to Joey Lauren Adams and her talent. And you know, it's interesting because she says to Sav, like, when she says that kind of gently but confrontationally, like, why do you want to talk to me? Those are all Kevin's words. I'm just saying them. But at the same time, I think that is partly her. Like the way she delivers them is her. And I think in a way she's selling herself short, maybe. But yeah, I just that fluidity scene, like they kept showing that scene between her and Ben Affleck when she's like, I came to this of my own, you know, my own choice. And I, you know, I'm lying here in your arms, and I, you know, look to every corner, and it's such a great scene. It really, really is, because it is lovely. Yeah.
I'm glad we all liked this. I have to tell you, for the first half hour, I was like, what the fuck? If this doesn't get a little deeper, we're dead. But
yeah, it was a little too much of a love fest for me about the movie. I'm like, this movie is fucked up. We need to get into this.
Yeah, but then it does, and it's just like, oh, and it just went to places I was not expecting. So I was really surprised pleasantly, or pleasantly surprised, if you're going to say it the correct way. So yeah,
yeah. I did kind of like the comic booky intro with the playing the
I did
trailer
too.
and then cutting to Roger Ebert being like, there was a good movie I watched this week, Chasing Amy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to disagree with Guinevere Turner on one thing. I do not love Kevin Smith's ear for dialogue. The thing that I have always, every time I hear something funny in a Kevin Smith movie or a piece of dialogue that I think really works, there's always, I think the Ben Affleck speech in the car in Chasing Amy is fucking cringe fest.
I
don't. The I love you. Now, maybe it's the way he delivers it. I also don't think that Ben Affleck is a great actor and never was and probably never will be. He can be very good, but most of the time he's just kind of a good-looking dude.
I liked that one critic.
see, I
My
don't
first
agree with
note
that
was
either.
the goatee was a mistake.
Yeah.
That was a really funny scene. That's my note. That's how I started. And I don't think they cut back to that either.
Yeah, that was funny. Yes, we have talked about our differences on Ben Affleck before. I'm not sure if we've ever done it on Mike, but we have.
Yes, off
you
mic
and
we
I
definitely
have
yes.
differing views of him.
Yes. I don't think he's like the greatest. And I think
right. No, and I don't think he's
more often
bad.
than not. More often than not, he is bad.
Yeah, I don't think that he's like. I think he's a quite fine director.
Yes, I agree with that.
And so I think that that's probably what he should focus on if he could. I don't know what his fucking career looks like now. So anyway, so that's Chasing Amy as far as I'm concerned.
Evan, did you have any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to slide in that joke about Ben Affleck's goatee because it really did make me laugh. It was quite funny.
It made me laugh too. Yeah.
Yeah, I just was going to say I was very glad that they had I cannot remember her name, but the woman who was the PhD student at the bisexuality studies.
Oh right, she came in kind of late.
Yeah, and she
Yeah.
was talking about hypervisibility and erasure and kind of the duality of those two things. And I thought that was a great point. I really loved what she had to say about that. And I thought it was great to see Princess Weeks. I've been a fan of her writing for a really long time. She's a bi-film critic, and it was great to hear her talk about her perspective on it as well. So yeah. So other than that, yeah, I agree with everything you both said, except I do think Kevin Smith has good ear for dialogue, but
Yeah.
I think he has an ear for realistic dialogue, I should say, which doesn't mean it's always like pretty or neat. Sometimes it's messy, but
okay.
But we'll agree to disagree.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Well, let's talk about our next film, which is the mystery Conclave. Who knew? Who knew a movie about the papacy would be such a big hit? This is directed by Edward Berger, written by Peter Strawn, based on the 2016 novel by Robert Harris, and it stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Lucian Masamati, Brian O'Byrne, a whole bunch of other people, and of course Isabella Rossellini. So this premiered at the 2024 Telluride Film Festival, screened at TIFF, and has been in theaters since October 25th. And let me give you the synopsis. Conclave follows one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, selecting a new pope. Cardinal Lawrence is tasked with running this covert process after the unexpected death of the beloved pope. Once the Catholic Church's most powerful leaders have gathered from around the world and are locked together in the Vatican halls, Lawrence finds himself at the center of a conspiracy and discovers a secret that could shake the very foundation of the church. Oh boy.
Yeah.
The foundation of the church?
I guess.
I mean, I think it possibly could if the secret got out.
I do too. Yeah, I do too. Actually,
Even though,
the new
like,
pope.
interpersonally, I would think,
Yes.
Seriously, what the hell? But the church and people in the church would probably be the head exploding emoji.
Yes. Yeah. So this starts off with, just like it says, Ralph Fiennes finds out about his pope that he's close to dying. And so they go into conclave. And I was like, I learned about papal conclaves from reading, oh my God, I'm embarrassed to say this, but it's true. Reading Dan Brown, Angels and Demons, they talk the papacy and the conclaves.
Yep.
And this is where I
Nice.
learned about it
Yeah.
many moons ago. But yeah, but it is, leave it to the Catholic Church to have such pomp and ceremony and,
Yeah.
secrecy.
Isolation, the voting.
Isolation, the smoke, the colored smoke, like all of it. But yeah, and so Stanley Tucci plays a fellow clergyman who's very concerned about John Lithgow, who is, or not John Lithgow, he's very concerned about one of the other guys who is very, very conservative and who's
Tedesco.
Thank you, Tedesco.
I don't
yes.
remember the actor's name, but
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's like anti, gay marriage and anti-birth control, like just very, very conservative.
Yeah, he's super
and a
old
bigot.
school.
Yes,
Yeah, like
very
we need to
much
get
so.
back to the old ways. Like
Yes.
let's bring back Mass in Latin kind of a guy.
Right. He thinks the next pope should be Italian, like that kind of like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Very like cut and dry. And Stanley Tucci is very much on the progressive side, like, no, we need to be supporting gay people and we need, access to birth control and, no, we shouldn't be racist and kind of all these good things. And yeah, so it's kind of like you see these like factions kind of break down over like who they're going to support and who gets more votes. And then there's a surprise new person who's coming into the conclave, whose name I now can't remember.
Benitez.
Thank you, Benitez. Yeah. And yes, and he's done ministry overseas. He's done it in Afghanistan, and he's and so no one has known about him. No one has heard from him, and but the Pope knew about him, obviously, and so he starts voting for in the votes. Because they do various rounds of votes, he starts voting for Lawrence, Ralph Fiennes, and Ralph Fiennes is like, "You shouldn't be voting for me. I don't want to do this. I'm not interested." And he's like, "No, but you're a good man. I'm going to vote for you."
Yeah,
and so
you don't want the power. That makes you a good guy to have the power.
Exactly. And so they do various rounds, and then meanwhile, Lawrence is doing investigations because there's, rumors and rumblings about John Lithgow. And so
he was the last to meet the Pope before the Pope died, and he'd heard from someone else that John Lithgow was fired that day by the Pope, and you don't necessarily know why, so he's digging into why he got fired, and then it turns out that he was selling indulgences or something. He was selling things to people, and so that was a whole scandal. And the Pope was firing him over that.
Right. Yeah. So, and as all of this is happening, as this investigation is going on, Lawrence keeps getting more and more votes, and Stanley Tucci keeps getting more and more pissed off.
Yeah, he gets less and less. Yeah. And there's a serious challenge by the Cardinal Adeyemi, who's in I forget which African country he's from.
He's Nigerian.
Nigerian. He mounts a serious challenge, and people are really concerned about him because he's also very conservative and very anti-gay. And it turns out that John Lithgow? It basically brings this nun there to the events who he had a relationship with and fathered a child with, and so he brings her there to kind of throw him off his game and shroud his candidacy in scandal. So he has to
it works.
Ends up having to step away.
It sure does work.
It works like fucking gangbusters.
Yeah. He was conniving, but he knew what he was doing. But so that's happening. And then we also have Isabella Rossellini, who is one of the nuns, and she's the one who's trying to protect that woman and shield her while all of this kind of mayhem is going on. And then we finally come to the end, and at very first it seems like Lawrence is the one who is going to be the Pope. But no. Because of a last minute speech about humanity and, coming together and kindness and kind of all of those things, those lovely, lovely things, Benitez is the one who is crowned the Pope. And then at the end, we find out, and meanwhile, while all of the investigations have been going on, one of the gentlemen has been giving information to Lawrence. He's the one who looked into like John Lithgow and everything. And he tells Lawrence about how Benitez went to a clinic, and then they talk and that's when you find out that Benitez is intersex. And that was the secret, and that was what he had talked to the Pope about, and so the Pope knew, and the Pope was like totally cool with it and everything. But and so that's the film.
And Lawrence basically is like, okay, I'm not going to tell anybody you're intersex. You're the Popa. And I'm sorry, I have to say Popa because every time I hear the word Pope, I think of the state and the sketch where the Popa is coming to the restaurant. So sorry if you guys don't know that one.
I don't know that one.
Oh, I'll have to send you the YouTube. There's no reason it should work, but it's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So let's dig into this. Evan, what did you think of Conclave?
I loved Conclave. I thought this was a really taut thriller. I thought it was fascinating going into the secret rituals and the conclave and the isolation, and watching the politicking that is going on in terms of people, trading alliances and trying to, jockey for votes. And all of that was just really interesting. And I love the trifecta of Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow in this movie. I think that's like a powerhouse trio of people to be kind of like playing off of each other. The mystery, I think, unfolds at a kind of reasonable, interesting pace, both with the John Lithgow dealings, when Ralph Fiennes decides that he's going to break the seal and go into the Pope's apartment and hunt for evidence of what John Lithgow was up to, which he finds behind the bed, which I thought was really cool. And I loved Benitez as a character. I liked how he was very just kind of low key the whole time. And then like he makes that really incredible speech that gets people to realize that he's an excellent candidate to be the next Pope.
Yeah, that he's like the real deal. He's not
Yeah,
just like some guy who wants to. He's not like John Lithgow. He's like, no, this guy is like the fucking what the church should be.
Yeah, really even-handed guy.
Yeah,
who believes in the mission, but also just believes in being a good person and trying to lift everybody up instead of tearing them down, which is what most of the other people there are doing. They're all caught up, in their squabbles. And he gives a speech something to the effect of like, don't we want what's best for the church? Like, should we forget all of this bullshit and all of these interpersonal squabbles and issues and get to what we're supposed to be here for, which is to shepherd the future of the church and bring it into the modern era and really make sure it succeeds and survives. And yeah, I thought the reveal at the end of him being intersex was really fascinating, and I loved that. The whole conversation that him and Ray Fiennes have, where you learn that information, just like basically right as he's about to like put on the ring and all the other like things that they need to do to announce him as the new pope. So I was on board with this movie. Thought it was really well done. I thought it was really interesting, really well acted by Ray Fiennes, who I usually love in almost everything he's in, but I think he's particularly good here. I don't know. Maybe if you both talk more about it, I'll remember more specifics, but that's kind of the high level take.
All right, Dave, what do you think?
well, you both know how I resisted seeing this movie
Yeah, you did.
for months. I was like, I don't want to see a movie about the Pope. And then I sent you both a text. I was 20 minutes into it, and I was like, forgive my trespasses against Conclave. This thing is fucking fascinating. So I just loved this. I mean, this is just solid mystery, great characterizations. Ray Fiennes just, I love that. It's kind of like you could say that's his mantra for the whole movie when he says, it's like maybe a third of the way in, and he says, the Pope wanted you to manage, so manage. And he fucking manages this movie. Like this movie, everybody's good in this movie, but everybody is sort of elevated by the space that Ray Fiennes gives them when they need their characters to be a little bigger, or when he screams down the hall at John Lithgow.
Yeah.
I think that's the only time he raises his voice in the movie. And I was just like, oh, Ray Fiennes, So,
yeah. Teacher's mad now. I'm in trouble.
I just, when he broke the seal to go into the Popa's bedroom, I was like, oh no. And then there's Sister Agnes. And I was like, Sister Agnes is on his team. Oh my God. I was just like, every time something like that happened. And I was always like, all right, well, Cardinal Benitez, he's from Afghanistan, but no one knows about him. When are we going to find out he's a phony? And then the movie's like, oh no, he's real. And it's just you're like, oh, okay, he's real.
I was kind of thinking like a fun twist would be he gets all the way and he crowned the next pope, and then he's like, oh, just kidding. I wasn't actually cardinal. I just wanted to see if I could get in here and scam you bozos.
Yeah, I could just be Popa. Yeah, and I really thought, Stanley Tucci, just what a fucking God, he's good. He's always so good.
Love him.
I'm kind of agnostic on John Lithgow. I always have been. Yeah, I know. Sometimes I think he's perfect, and sometimes I'm just like, John Lithgow with that fucking voice in this movie, So
it is a very distinctive
it's
voice.
so distinct. But there's something about his height and his his stature, I guess, and that voice of his that cuts through anything.
Yeah.
That really works for a sort of, if it makes sense, a quiet blowhard, like
totally,
like Tremblay. The one thing, and this is such a minor quibble, it's so stupid, but the fact that Lawrence's first name is actually Thomas, and I'm like, really, Doubting Thomas is our main character? Okay, but otherwise, I thought, that's just so stupid. Me having a quibble with it. So I just loved this. I loved it. So I can't wait to watch it again, frankly.
Thrilled to hear that you enjoyed this. I was going to joke and say that your penance was that you had to tell us how much you loved it. If you did indeed love it by the end of the movie, you had to be, robust with your praise on mic.
Bless me, Evan, for I have sinned. I spoke ill of Conclave before having seen it. I bore false witness. Yeah. So
I'm just now thinking about John Lithgow's stature because I saw him in person, and whoo boy, he is tall.
he's
He
a
is
tall man.
tall person. Yes,
Mm.
who likes to wear a jaunty capelet and beret.
Yeah, and he's
Not
also
surprised to hear that.
No,
he's also good at like disguising himself too, because you sometimes
Yeah.
forget how tall he is until you see him around other people, and you're like, damn, you're like 6 inches taller than everybody
yeah,
at
he
least.
really is. Yeah,
You know, so yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm delighted that you loved this too, Dave, because that would have really sucked if you did.
Yeah, it would have been a
Really
bummer. We finally convinced him
torturous
to
for
watch
you.
anything.
I
Oh,
know.
it sucked.
Like, fuck you, it sucked.
Wouldn't that be amazing if I was just like, well, I finally watched it, guys, and fuck you, it sucked. I
It blows. No, but I know, but I will say this is a movie that has had so much hype around it that I feel like, you're like, is it really that good? Is it really going to be that good? And yeah, no, it really is that good.
yeah.
The acting is fantastic. I agree with you both. I think Ralph Fiennes is stellar. I think Stanley Tucci, I mean, I always love both of them, but they're really, really great here. And I think the thing about Ralph Fiennes is that he is so subtle.
Mm.
And so you're right that when he yells down the hall, it's like, oh shit. Like, because you're not expecting that because he's been so kind of reserved and quiet this whole time. I also think Isabella Rossellini's dirty looks are great the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like she's doing a lot silently. Even when she does speak, like she has a lot of great facial expressions, but she's doing a lot silently to convey her moods and opinions about what's happening. But yeah, I think this is well written. It's a great script. I think it's really well edited. Great ensemble. I liked Benitez's character too. I also thought it was really fascinating to have an intersex man at the end. And it's something that could have felt like a really kind of cheap twist, like for salacious purposes. But the way, because I feel like if I was telling somebody that who hadn't seen the film, it might come off that way. But when you watch the film and the way it kind of happens organically, and it's interesting because I was tipped off as soon as he said the clinic in Geneva. I'm like, oh, he's a trans man. That's what I thought. And so I was not surprised at all when he was intersex, because Geneva clinics are known, like it's a place historically where people have gone for gender affirming surgeries. Historically. But yeah, so but organically the way it unfolds in this film, it does not feel cheap. It does not feel salacious. It feels like, no, this is just kind of a natural progression. And Benitez is kind of so ahead of everyone else when it comes to progressive thinking and kindness and empathy and bringing everyone together, that it kind of makes sense. Like, oh, you would have someone who's intersex, or you would have someone who's queer or trans. And like, so it just kind of, it feels like the next step. And so to me, it very much worked in a great way.
Wow. 2 love fests in a row.
I know.
The fuck is going on Spoiler
right?
Piece?
Can we hold on to it?
It's a nice thing. I know, right? But I also have to say I think this film is really fascinating. Evan, you had talked about the politicking behind, what was going on. And I think it is really fascinating to look at the power dynamics and the grabs for power that are happening here too. So very interesting.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
The fucking deal that Tremblay and Bellini had the whole time.
Ooh, yes.
And how when Lawrence finally talks to Bellini about it, he's just like, so what did he offer you? A fucking, basically, I can't remember what he calls it, but he's like, yeah, he said I could be the minister of Bleebly. And I was just like, oh, Ralph Fiennes just coming right out with it. And Stanley Tucci not denying it. God, I love this movie.
Yeah.
It's just Stanley Tucci's like, hey, I'm caught. Yeah.
All right. Did we have any other thoughts? Any final thoughts? Anything more we want to say?
Yeah, I'm all set.
No. Well, actually, I do have one minor thing. I liked that the Pope. I like that in that conversation between Ralph Fiennes and Lawrence and Benitez. I like that Benitez also reveals that the Pope had religious reasons for feeling like it was kosher. It had basically been like, okay, well, God made you that way, and it's important to like leave his work intact. I just thought that was a really cool little piece that was kind of slid in there.
Well, it is. I'm glad you said that because so many homophobic people who want to hide behind religious zealotry talk about, it being sinful and being an abomination and talking about gender in this very binary way when gender's not. And, clearly intersex people prove that it's not. Yeah, completely agree with you that it is like, wouldn't you, if you were religious, wouldn't you kind of look at it as like, well, God doesn't make mistakes. God makes everyone, beautiful. So aren't all bodies beautiful, including, intersex bodies? And
Right.
yeah. So great point.
Thanks.
All right. Well, let's see if this love train is continuing to chug along.
It gets to the station unharmed.
Right? As we talk about our third and final film, the new release Nickel Boys. This is a drama directed by Ramel Ross, written by Ramel Ross and Jocelyn Barnes, and it is based on the 2019 novel by Colson Whitehead. And it stars Ethan Harris and Brandon Wilson, as well as co-starring Ingenue Ellis Taylor, Hamish Linklater, Jimmy Fails, and Daveed Diggs. So let me give you the synopsis. Elwood Curtis's college dream shatters alongside a 2-lane Florida highway. Bearing the brunt of an innocent misstep, he's sentenced to the netherworld of Nickel Academy, a brutal reformatory sunk deep in the Jim Crow South. He encounters another ward, the Seen-It-All Turner. The two black teens strike up an alliance. Turner dispensing fundamental tips for survival, Elwood clinging to his optimistic worldview. Backdropped by the burgeoning civil rights movement, Elwood and Turner's existence appear worlds away from Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s burnished oratory. Despite Nickel's brutality, Elwood strives to hold on to his humanity, awakening a new vision for Turner. This premiered at the 2024 Telluride Film Festival and screened at the New York Film Festival. That synopsis is true, obviously, because it came from the press release, but I feel like it leaves, of course it leaves a lot out because it's a synopsis, but this is an interesting film in that it is much more fluid in its format, in that it moves back and forth in time. It starts off with Elwood as a young boy, and it's kind of just like fragments of memories and, snippets of his early life. And the big unique thing in the structuring of this is the cinematography, which is done in first person view. And we get a lot of it from Elwood, but then we also switch sometimes to Turner's POV, and then it's done in first person from his as well, and it moves back and forth. But yeah, we see the boy's friendship. We see the atrocities that are happening at Nickel Academy. Some of it is alluded to. Some of it we see outright when boys are beaten. And they're also never really let out. Like, they have to like earn their way out, which is just gross. And they have to do manual labor. And it's just repugnant and disgusting, the whole thing. But then we also see Elwood as an adult, and we see him doing research on Nickel Academy and how there are mass graves found in the present day. And he keeps researching and wants to go. But then there is the twist that we get, that it's not actually Elwood, it's actually Turner, because Elwood and Turner escaped from Nickel Academy. And as they're both bicycling away, Turner pulls ahead, or Turner's ahead, and Elwood falls behind, and Elwood gets shot by the white kid who was there, who had worked with Turner before. And so Turner runs away and gets to Elwood's grandmother, and then takes on his identity. But yeah, and leading up to Elwood getting sent to Nickel Academy, he's like a really bright kid. He has a really it's clear he has a bright future ahead of him. He's great in school. He's a really sweet kid. He has a lovely relationship with his grandmother. And then he also believes in activism and protesting. And he's on his way to taking college level courses at a college that his high school teacher had encouraged him to take. And so he hitchhikes and he's in the car with this guy who's very nice. And then all of a sudden the cops show up and the guy's like, don't look backwards, don't look back. And then because of this incident, being in the car is what gets him sent to Nickel Academy. And their friendship, Elwood and Turner's, is really a lifeline for both boys. But yeah, so that's the synopsis. That's the whole thing. Let's dig into it. What did you guys think?
Well, I should mention that I didn't see the last 45 minutes of this because I ran out of time, but I did read the book. So it has the same ending. So
okay. There we go.
You were looking a little bit at first like it wasn't the same ending. You had a look of kind of shock on your face. It made me think, is he messing with us, or is this actually how the book ends, or is this completely different?
No, it's not what's the one with Tom Cruise where he's the lawyer? It's not the Firm, which has a complete the foim, as Bugs Bunny would say. Yeah, it's not the foim. So yeah, this is a similar, very similar ending.
Got it.
But Evan, what did you think? Megan asked us, and since you saw the whole thing.
Oh, sure. So I thought the format was both simultaneously interesting and frustrating. I like the idea of this kind of first person perspective. I think it's really interesting throughout the movie. And I like that we see first person perspective from both Elwood and Turner. And I thought that was really interesting, seeing it from both of their point of view. And when they kind of swap perspectives at points, it's with Elwood for a while, then it becomes Turner, and we see things from his perspective, including some of the same interactions. But at the same time, I felt like I kind of needed more variety from the movie in that way. I just found it kind of tiring that it was this first person perspective, even though it was doing some really interesting things visually from a cinematography perspective. Like there's one scene in particular that I remember finding really fascinating where Elwood's sitting on the bus and this girl kind of slides up underneath his chair.
Oh, yeah.
And then he looks down and watches her slide back down, and the camera is witnessing all of this. So there's some really interesting things that the camera is doing. And I really think the cinematography is worth, talking about and seeing, but it just felt very repetitive. And I think my other major problem with the movie is that, as you mentioned, it's Megan, it's very fluid. It moves back and forth, which to me, it felt more like a lot of just vignettes that were strung together as opposed to a movie that had any kind of flow to it. So I liked aspects of the movie. I think the two lead performances were really strong, and I think it's a really interesting story and really interesting cinematography, but I just struggled to get through it because I felt like it just didn't between the first person perspective and the vignette style storytelling, it was a slog. It was so hard to get through. But I will qualify this by saying I think it's worth sticking it through to see the twist at the end, that it is in fact Turner and not Elwood, because there's these scenes in the future where you're seeing future Elwood, but you don't see his face. And then as you mentioned, that's Daveed Diggs in the future. So I think it was worth sticking through it to kind of get to the end and see how it turned out. But I just struggled. I was on the struggle bus to get through it.
Struggle bus.
All right. Well, Dave, I know you didn't finish the whole movie, but what did you think of what you saw?
I have to say that I had such a problem with the cinematography that it was really hard for me to, it wasn't hard for me to stay engaged, but it was hard for me to, I don't know. It's not that I found it off-putting, although it is off-putting to me. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the I don't want to call it a gimmick because I don't think the filmmakers think it's a gimmick.
No.
But I found, especially when we see the same thing from different perspectives, like the oatmeal scene,
Yeah.
like, because for a while there, I was just like, what the fuck is going on with this movie for like the first 10 minutes? And then I was like, oh, this is a first person perspective. And then the next thought I had was, is this whole fucking movie going to be first person perspective? And sort of just a different person's. And
right.
I think the lead performances were strong. I'm glad that the movie kept the novels. I mean, I don't know if I want to call it a twist. It is a twist, but there are clues to it throughout in the book. And I really liked Ingenue Ellis Taylor.
She's always great.
Yeah. I liked Hamish Linklater.
He's good in
just
this
so
too. Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah, very creepy.
Really like, and creepy how understated his character is too.
Mhm.
Just like,
Yeah,
like
he's
you just
sadistic.
Yeah, you just look
so
at him
menacing.
you look at him and you're just like, malevolence. This is malevolence
Mhm.
personified. So all those things I liked. The only hang up I really had was the cinematography. I mean, it's a little languid in places too. It's not, it's not brisk, but that's fine. That's not like a problem. But this is a long movie where lots of things happen. So, I prefer my long movies where nothing happens. So anyway.
Nothing in quotes, air quotes.
Yeah, exactly. Megan, how about you?
I had a very different experience. I loved this. I thought this was a beautiful film. I do understand what you're both saying though about the POV, and I know, like, Dave, I think you said it's not a gimmick, but it kind of is. Like, it feels gimmicky, even though you're absolutely right. I don't think Ramel Ross or Jomo Frey, who did the cinematography, I don't think they think of it as a gimmick,
Right.
but it is kind of gimmicky,
Right.
Nonetheless.
It's
but
not
yeah,
hardcore Harry.
Right.
I just remember that movie.
That's what
that was a gimmick.
I actually thought of hardcore
that's
Harry.
a gimmick.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and I think it's kind of a brilliant choice to do it in the beginning and introducing both of the boys. I think it makes sense. I wish at some point it had kind of shifted to not being first person, like maybe halfway through the film or even sooner. Having said that, though, I think the cinematography is gorgeous.
It
Like,
is.
It's pretty. It's definitely pretty.
Yeah, like, it's Jomo Frey also did All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt, which is one of the most stunning films I've ever seen in its cinematography. And very similar to that film, it has like this dreamlike, almost like trance feel to it in its visuals. And like, just from the beginning, seeing like the orange tree, and we're seeing it vertically as he's laying on the ground, as Elwood's laying. Like, I loved that. And like you, Evan, I loved the scene on the bus with the girl,
Yeah.
like the little girl underneath, and the camera moves. Like, I just think it's great.
The ironing scene I was just thinking of,
Yes.
where
Yes,
his grandmother's
the iron.
ironing, and you see his
Absolutely.
reflection in the
It's
iron as she's moving it back and forth. It is beautiful. It really is.
Yeah, I love that. So I really found this a really captivating and entrancing film. And it's interesting. I don't disagree with you about the vignettes either, though. And I do think it's one of those things, like, it either works for you or it doesn't. And for
Right.
me, it really, I can see why it would stymie your flow and the attention that you had towards it. For me, it made sense though, because, and the way it moves through time, because he's haunted by this. He can't escape the trauma of this.
Yes.
And it's following him. And I think of this as like memories. Like, memories never come in a linear fashion. They come, hard and fast, and they come in kind of a rush, and they come out of order. And so to me, it kind of made sense that it would play with time in that way, because it kind of felt like the way he was working through his memories and his guilt and shame and pain and missing his friend and kind of all of these things. So the structuring of it really worked for me, as well as the visuals. The performances, I think, are stunning. I think the two leads are excellent. I think Ingenue Ellis Taylor is also excellent. Hamish Linklater. Hamish Linklater, funny enough, I just saw like a snippet of an interview with him on Letterboxd and on Instagram, and he talked about how you do other movies so you can do a movie like this. Like, he just was like gushing with like praise for being in this movie, which I just thought was kind of really it's lovely to see. I mean, you always want, like, I always hope an actor likes what they're doing, but it's kind of, I don't know, there's something sometimes special about the way certain actors speak about certain projects. But yeah, I think this is a fascinating film, especially because Ramel Ross this is his first narrative film, because he's a documentary filmmaker, and his film before, Hale County. Oh my God, I never get the title right. It's like Hale County, Good Morning, something like that. Hale County, This Morning, This Evening. That's it. It's a beautiful documentary. It's really, really fantastic. And I think this is a really important story, of course, talking about, like, it's based on Dozier Academy, which had mass graves and had atrocities and was around for 111 years in Florida. And it's despicable. And it also kind of reminded me of the documentary that came out this year, Sugarcane, which is about indigenous boarding schools in the US, and just the absolute disgusting, despicable, racist abuse happening to children at these
Yeah.
schools. And I put schools in air quotes because I'm not actually teaching anything.
Right.
But yeah, it's just horrific. So I think having focusing on this friendship that was such a lifeline and such a buoy in this, kind of sea of hate and awfulness is just a really beautiful, tender thing to witness. So I just found this a really beautiful film and loved it.
I wanted to comment on what you were saying about the trauma, because I do think the film effectively conveys that.
Mm-hmm.
As I was watching it, I was realizing that the storytelling was him processing all of these horrible memories and trauma. I think the film was very effective in conveying that and how difficult it was. And I'm just reminded of the scene where he runs into that other guy in the future, where he runs into that other guy who was there, and they sit down and talk, and he says, do you remember how I got out? And the guy's like, no, I don't remember any of that. Oh, that's just kind of a, like, his time there is marred by its own trauma to the point he doesn't even remember necessarily that one of them didn't make it.
Yeah. That's a brutal scene to watch.
Yeah, it's rough, especially when he's like, I can't be here. I gotta leave.
Right. And the guy's like asking for a job, and it's just like, oh God, buddy.
Yeah.
I had one other thought about the cinematography, and I was thinking about this while I was watching it, and I came up again while you were talking about it, Megan, is if it had been shot in a more traditional way, I'm not sure that would be any better,
Yeah,
because
that's a great point.
I think the story is such that the story kind of deserves like a more thoughtful palette, way to shoot, whatever. And I'm not sure this is the right one, but I'm also not sure what the right one would be. So that's, maybe that's why I don't shoot movies. So,
I mean, but you bring up a really great point, because I mean, you've read the book, obviously, so you know far better than I would. But I have read multiple articles that have talked about the kind of unfilmable quality of this novel. So I wonder, so I'm thinking about that too, like what you're saying, like, what would have been better, and and maybe this is the best way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, it's a good thing that the cinematography is striking such that it is. So, like that shot at the beginning of the oranges, and he's lying he's obviously lying on his side, looking up at the, and then he, sits up straight, and you're like, what the, like, seriously, for the first 10 minutes, like, what the fuck is going on with this movie? I can't believe it took me that long to figure out. I was like, oh, so, but I mean, sometimes you feel like a dum-dum. What can you do?
Well, sometimes you just have to like surrender and go along and be like, I don't know what's happening, but I just got to go along with this. And then it like, falls into place.
Yep. So.
I don't think that makes you a dum-dum.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure
You're
my
welcome.
fourth grade teacher would think differently, but.
Well, screw them.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
All right. Do we have any final thoughts? Any other things we want to say about this?
I think I'm actually going to watch the last 45 minutes.
Yeah, please do. I'm curious to hear what you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do it.
You're like, if I must.
Whatever.
Evan, did you have any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Okay, well, let's do a recap. So, Chasing Amy opened in theaters in November, and it's on VOD December 15th. Would you guys recommend it? I think it's probably safe to say we all would.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Emphatically.
And then Conclave, it opened in theaters as well. And I don't know if it is streaming. It might be streaming soon. I think it's going to be streaming soon. Anyway, I think we all would also, I was going to say, would you recommend it? I think we all would recommend Conclave.
I
yeah.
would say watch Conclave twice. I mean, it's like watch it and then go get lunch and then come back and watch it again.
Nice. And then Nickel Boys, which opens in theaters, actually New York theaters, December 13th. It opens in LA, December 20th. And then it's opening in more cities, January 3rd, including cities such as Boston. Would you both recommend it?
I think so. I think I can't not recommend it.
Okay. What about you, Evan?
I'm feeling kind of similarly. Like it didn't work for me, but I think it's still worth watching. And like I said, I think for me, even though I struggled to get through it, by the time I got to the end, I feel like the kind of way it ended was worth my while. So yeah, I would say see it.
That's totally fair. All right. And I would say see it as well. So, all right. Well, we want to give a huge thank you to our editor, Otto Clamor. Otto, thank you so much for making us sound great week after week.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Otto.
You can find Spoiler Piece Theater anywhere you get podcasts. We are all over the place. We're also at our website, spoilerpiece.com. We're also all over social media. We're at Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, Threads. So come find us, follow us, say hello. You can also email us. Let us know your thoughts about any and all movies. spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call.
At 862-21-PEACE.
You can leave us a voicemail message, leave us a text. Let us know what you thought of these. We always love hearing from you. And if you like the show, consider rating and reviewing us. That helps us get the word out, which is always great and huge appreciation. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece to take you to your preferred platform of choice. You can also just rate us directly at Spotify or Apple Podcasts, which helps us out a lot. And if you really, really like the show, consider becoming a patron if you're not already. And thank you to those of you who already are. For $5 a month, you get access to weekly bonus episodes. This week's, where we talked about Juror number 2, and we had a lively conversation about that film, and lots of different points of view, which is always great. It's a fun time. So yeah, and you also get to vote in monthly polls, which is also fun. And you get access to our back catalog of hundreds of bonus episodes. And if you love the show, which we hope you do, you can also check out our TeePublic store. You can find the link at our website, and you can get all kinds of merch. You can get hoodies and t-shirts and pillows and mugs. Makes great holiday gifts too.
Woo!
So for yourself or for others. But yeah, so thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate you. My name is Megan Kearns. I write for Edge Media Network. I'm a co-host of the Slashers podcast, member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at OpinionS World, or on Instagram and Letterboxd at The OpinionS.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write about movies. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I am on Letterboxd, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads as Dave Sees Movies.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, co-author of Your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living, and co-host of the It's the Pictures podcast. You can follow me on social media. That's Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and Threads as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.